So yesterday we were doing the verse number 5 and 6 from the Sankara Bhashyas, and we would look at the interpretation of these according to we have looked at Sankarananda as well, but today we would look at our great Madhusudana Saraswati, who sort of expands it and gives it a larger context. He puts it in a particular context so that we can make sense of it going forward another 3-4 verses. And earlier, we have already discussed what are the qualifications to reach that higher level of self realization, where Bhagavan says that you reach me. What to meditate on? Bhagavan said you have to meditate on me in the last 2 verses of chapter 14. Now he's saying what is that Dhyavasta, that is the Purushottama thing, that is the name of this chapter. And now he's describing when the student asks, is it possible for me to reach there? Instead of saying either no or yes, he says, well, these are the people who reach there. And that is how he mentions Nirmana Moha Jita Sangha Dosha Adhyatma Nitya Vinibritta Kamaha Dvandir Vimuktaha Sukha Dukha Sanjair Gachyantya Mudhaha Padamabhyayam Tat. So these are the long set of qualifications. Should be beyond very quickly. We can just read through what Sri Madhusudana Saraswati mentions. Very succinct and yet to the point without any sort of expansion, but Sankarananda was great in explaining everything. He says, Mano ahankaro garvaha. Mana means actually pride, egoism. Moha to aviveko viparyayova. It's delusional. It's a faulty understanding, a wrong understanding of who we are. Like, for example, we say, apne ko bahut bada samajhta hai, or you have complete obsession with a certain imagined self-image, because of which you ruin a lot of relations and your business prospects. Tabhyam niskranta nirmana moha, somebody who has just escaped the negative influences, the impacts of these two, is nirmana moha. And tau nirgatau yebhyah teva. Yatha ahankara vivekabhyam rahita iti yavat. So somebody who is free from both ahankara and aviveka, lack of discrimination and hell lot of egotism, is free from both of these. Jita sangha doshaha. So he's somebody who has won over sangha dosha. And we had a long discussion yesterday how these indriyas connect with external things and what at the root of these is desire, because of which we are born again and again. And because of that, you have to put a break on this. The only way to do is you have to do sangha varjana. You abandon your temptation to fall prey to external, whatever inducement, incitements to your senses. Like, you have a hell lot of, those guys who call you up, say, why don't you invest in this policy, that policy? A lot of these commercial calls that we have, we just have to find a way to stay away from a lot of such proposals coming from samsara. So many commercial calls. The samsara calls come every now and then through different symbolisms that we deal with. Priya Priyas Sannidhau api Ragadvesa Vivarjita Ityavat. So he rather very simple way mentions that you may be close to somebody which you love. You have great attraction for it. Could be a certain dish, could be food, could be a friend, could be a book. But he says, well, I have something more important to do and stays away from it. And then sometimes he may be near something which he hates, but he doesn't pick up a fight. But he knows how to hold himself and remains quiet. And that is how he maintains himself. So that is it. Ragadvesha virahita, ragadvesha varjitaha iti yavat. Adhyatma nityaha paramatma swarupa alochana tatpara. So he's all the time sort of, he's very keen, as I discussed yesterday, because you cannot be completely having a full and comprehensive understanding about what is that Atma Tattva. Then we are liberated. But then Adhyatma Nishta is possible even without full Adhyatma Jnana. On the journey, you may not know the destination, but you can be very steadfast in your journey. That's what is hinted here. Vinibritta Kamaha Vishesato Niravaseshena Nibritaha Kama. So with any avasesa. So there is no, some people say avidya, so something remains. But these desires, even if a little of them remain, they expand and they'll spoil the whole thing. It's like a cancer. Let's imagine there are 20 million cancer cells in a particular corner of the body, and the surgeons do the surgery and they remove them. By mistake, they are leaving only a few hundred cancer cells. Even after surgery, what happens? They will again expand, and they'll again, expand and push the whole body towards metastasis. So that's one of the reasons as to why it's such a tricky thing, because even a few cells are allowed to live in the body, the cancer is still there. It'll expand and it'll reappear in a bigger, worse, more malignant form. And therefore, he's saying, Niravaseshena, you should be able to remove it. Nibritaha kama Vishaya bhoga. What are the desires? Ye samte Vishaya bhoga. Any desire for having, sort of to entreat yourself with the outside pleasures, which is a distraction. This absolutely, from sadhana point of view, I would like to share, has nothing to do with whether you should be wearing some good clothes, whether you should press your dresses or not. You shouldn't wear good clothes, or reasonably. I mean, if you're going to a meeting and you want to present yourself, so do you go there shabbily dressed? No, that's not the idea here. The idea is to always bring in that golden sense of proportions, that you are self-aware all the time, that we are doing this sadhana. Doesn't mean that you're sort of trying to deliberately live a very, what do you call it, a shabby life, and you're not having a sense of aesthetic, some sort of a judgment. That's one of the reasons why Sri Aurobindo in Pondicherry, they say that spiritual life doesn't have to be aesthetically dull. You don't have to live in an extremely simple but an extremely dirty place. No, that's not the idea here. He's saying that Vishaya Bhogas here, essentially the critical point here is not whether your house is big or small, it's whether you are getting trapped by the uh, you know uh, attractions of the outside world who capture your attention. So it's quite possible that a person leads a spiritual life, but he has a reasonable. I mean, that I would concession I like to give, especially during the sadhana phase, because it's so critical for a person to sort of move forward and not get stuck with these details, these small things. I mean, I'm mentioning it specifically because in very traditional paramparas of Vedanta and all, they give too much of importance to these externalities, losing attention on the key important things, which is all here, it's all in the brain. Doesn't mean I don't get involved in anything and then you're sort of indulging in a lot of things which are going to spoil this whole mental, you know, equanimity that you're working on. But then you become too fidgety and you are fighting too much of details in life. I don't think there's much energy or attention left for genuine spiritual practice. I think somebody has to draw a line here, because here the literal interpretation of whatever is mentioned here might actually affect negatively our spiritual sadhanas or practice. So we have to sort of look at that in a very impartial way. Kamaha Vishaya Bhoga Jesamte Viveka Vairagya Dwara. So they have discrimination and also detachment. Tyakta Sarva Karmanaha. So they have abandoned all sorts of, Sarvarambha Parityagi. That is how it came in the previous chapter. Ityarthaha. Dvandehi Sitoshna Hyutvipasadibhi Sukha Duksha Sanjaihi. So they are sort of free from happiness and sadness. The dualities, they are not affected by anymore, and they are not looking at it's too hot, too cold. I mean, if you are in Abu Dhabi in summer, you want an AC room, I think that's fine. That's not a problem. You're in Antarctica, you say that no, I should be following what's written there. No, it's written for a temperate climate. These monks were living in India and writing in India. So if you have to spend a few weeks in Greenland or Iceland, and then you carry this book with you, okay, so the body will die of frostbite or all sorts of problems. So here we have to all the time contextualize whatever is given as advice in these great books. Sukha Duksha Sanjayhi, the whole thing is actually spiritual. It's all internal. It's not so much. The details are given to give us a proper context, but then we have to see this in a particular framework. the geographical, climatic, and cultural framework, we got to make sense of it. Sanghi sukha dukha hetu tvat sukha dukha namakaihi sukha dukha sangaihi iti pathandare sukha dukhavyam sangha sambandho. So essentially, he's talking about the most important thing is your relationship, or whatever sort of appears to you as very pleasing and something which upsets you or creates in you an element of aversion. And he's saying that it's very important that we stay away from the psychological processes of attraction and aversion, because when these two things come in, I like it, I don't like it, the Buddhists describe that as a state of craving. Then equanimity is very difficult. Meditation is very difficult. So, from that point of view, we should be free from that state of craving. You want to hate something or you want to love something. You may not use these words, but essentially, very, you are like a pendulum. You are swinging between different emotions, between thoughts, and then meditation is a far cry. So, sango samando ye samtehi sukha sukha sangehi dvandar vimuktaha parityaktaha amudhaha. What is amudha? Moha bimukta. What is that? Vedanta pramana sanjata samya jnana nivarita atma ajnanaha. So, this ignorance about the self that has been removed. How? Because they are exposed to certain texts, Bhagavad Gita and Prakarana Granthas and Upanishads. So they verily know what is the self. Not directly. Aparoksha Jnana is yet to come. They are just good students. So they have heard it and they have Shraddha, and they have, Bhagavan has said that there are four categories of people, right? The Jnana yogis, and then you have the Sankhya yogis, the Raja yogis, and then you have the Karma yogis. And finally, he says there are people who are actually not exposed to these great spiritual philosophical works, but still they have complete dedication to the validity and truth of the Upanishadic Vakyas. And they listen to their acharyas, have faith in their sadgurus, whosoever he is, in good faith, whether it's Thakur or Sri Aurobindo or is Shankaracharya or Ramanuja, whosoever is dear to your heart, could be Buddha, I have no problem. So far, a person is kind of oriented towards a certain, that particular polar star, his focus, his attention, and his Shruti Para. He respects the key insights of the Upanishads, that all of it is apparently real. Ultimately, what is real is not immediately available to the eyes, but that is what we should all be trying to experience and focus on and transform our consciousness. With that sort of an attitude, also he reaches there. So he's mentioning here that amudha, who is not mohagrasta, how is that possible? He's not yet there. He's not atmagyani yet in the right sense of the term, but then that person has full dedication to the Shruti Vakyas. He is having faith in his Acharya. Whosoever is, I have no problem. It should be Shruti Anukula, should be kind of in line with the Upanishads. The insights, not the literal sentences, but the real insights, the deeper insights of the Upanishads. And in that context, this fellow meditates, and then he's Amudha, and he'll get the Paramapadam. Tadeva Gantavyam Padam Vishinasti. That is expanded in the verse number 6, which we did from Sankara Bhashya yesterday, and we will do and we'll expand the meaning of it in the light of Sri Madhusudana Saraswati's commentary today. Na tadabhasayate shuryo na sasanko na pavakaha yad gatva na nivartante tadhama paramam mama. That destination is the ultimate destination. That's me and my location. Bhagavan has said that you will get that Brahman, Brahma Bhuyaya Kalapate. It's not different from me, focus on me. And that's how he started chapter 17. Because a person might confuse, is the Brahman and you two different things? Are you controlling the Brahman? But there will be some kind of a Dvaitapatti. There will be some kind of an apprehension of duality between Brahman and Bhagavan Krishna. That is refuted summarily in the end of chapter 14. So here he says that Tadhamam, that, that thing is that Brahman, Mama. Ultimately, he's saying there is a Aikya, because they are basically we cannot have a conversation without some Dvaita Dvaitatmaka Bhasa Prayoga. We have to talk in the language of duality because the non-dual state is not very wordy. It's not a word words. It's beyond all words. It's all in pure silence. So obviously there'll be no consultation. There'll be no dialogue. There'll be no classes. There'll be pure, your exalted state in that state of truth, where you have gone beyond all that, and you come back. You interact with everything. You speak. When you begin to speak, even after Atmagyana, you'll speak in the language of dualism, because there will be Vyavaharika Bheda, and with Bheda Buddhi will talk. That's not a problem. But Paramarthikatvena, your Buddhi is completely Parinishpanna Atma Buddhi. That is there where you are not recognizing any dualities. Like we talk about the blue sky, but we fully know it's not blue. Blueness is having no relationship with the sky. That we studied, our whatever we studied in school, in physics or later on, we know that truth. There's no doubt about it. But then we say, beautiful blue sky. I don't think there's any kind of problem with a Vedanti talking and managing himself in samsara. Let's go to how this is expanded. Bhagavan is saying that Dhamma is not a place which can be lit up by the sun or the moon or Pavakaha, by fire. And Madhusudana Saraswati beautifully explains, Yada Vaishnavam Padam Gatva Yogina Na Nivartante. The yogis don't come back. They don't take a body again. Why? The reason for taking up a body again is ajnana or desire. Out of ajnana comes desire. But that karana is absent in them. So there is no reason as to why they have to come back. There's no relevance. So Yad Vaishnavam Padam Gatva Yogino Na Nivartante Tat Padam. Sarvabhasana Saktiman Api Suryo Na Bhasayate. This Surya, which lights up the whole world, whether it's forests or fires or rivers or houses or people, it gives light to everybody, but it doesn't light that up. And he'll explain why. And when the sun isn't there, what do we look for at night? We look for the moon. Then he says, Suryastamayepi. Then once there is a asta of the Surya, Stamayepi Chandro Bhasuko Drishta Ityasankyaha Na Sasankaha. No, not even the moon. And if it's a full moon night, there's no sun and the moon, we light up a fire to see things. Surya Chandra Masayor Vayorapi Astamaye Agnihi Prakasako Drishtaha. We see that fire gives us light. It could be an electric lamp or whatever, with some kind of a fire. But that doesn't light up the Brahman, the Atma. Why? Ityasangya na pavaka, even the fire cannot light that up. Bhasayate iti ubhayatrapi anusajyate. That particular thing, na tad bhasayate suryaha, na tad bhasayate sasankaha, na tad bhasayate pavakaha. That's how you should do the adhyaya. You should repeat, because there is just one verb, dhatu, and there are 3-4 things you have to use that as a predicate for all of them. Then kutaha suryadiram tatra prakasanam asamarthyam ityata aha. Why can't the sun light that up? It lights up everything, isn't it? The teacher answers, Tad dhama yotihi swayam prakasam adityadi sakala jada jyoti ravabhasakam paramam prakrishtam mama vishnoho swarupatmakam padam. Please, boy, understand. That Brahman I'm talking about, the Vishnu Padam, that Tadhamam Paramam Padam. Remember, it's not a Jada thing. I'm talking about the Satchidananda Swarupa. I'm talking about that Chaitanya Swarupa, number 1. Number 2, it's Sarva Avabhasaka, including sun, moon. When I say Sarva Avabhasaka, it lights up the whole world. With its luminosity, it lights up everything, which means all the stars and the galaxies and satellites, moons, everything are included. Natural or artificial are included there. So if you are putting a torchlight on something, a book or a wall, that wall or the book cannot light up the torchlight. They are bhashya. The torchlight is the bhasaka. It's the illuminator. They are illumined. The illumined, even though it looks bright to somebody in darkness, cannot illuminate the illuminator, because the source of its illumination is that illuminate which is Sarva Bhasaka. It lights up everything. That is the Atma. That is the grand Parama Purusha. Tadhama Paramam Padam, Bhagavan says. He's saying Tadhama Jyotihi. And that is, he's talking about that is Atma, that is Jyoti Swarupa, Swayam Jyotihi, Swayam Prakasha, Adityadi Sakala Jada Jyotir Avabhasakam. All the Jada Jyotis, it could be, these are lifeless, isn't it? They are not Chetana Varga, whether it is Surya or it is Chandra or it is fire or anything that you're talking about. As I was talking about that Kena Upanishad story, that Bhagavan comes and says, can you just, burn this blade of grass, and the fire fails, and asks Vayu, can it just kind of move it a few inches? It fails. Because it is Sarva Niyamaka, that is Param Brahma Swarupa, and therefore he's saying the Tadhama. And then he beautifully saying, Paramam Prakrishnam Vishnuha Swarupatmakam Padam Nahi Yo Yad Bhasyaha. जो जिसका भाष्य है, the one which is illumined by another, यद भाष्य, यस्य भासः भाष्य, येन भाष्य, जिसके द्वारा वो भासित होता है, by which it is lit up, it's illumined, that one, स स्वभासकम तम भासयितुम इष्टे. So it cannot भासयितुम इष्टे, it cannot. नहीं यो यद भास्यः स स्वभासकम तम भासयितुम इष्टे. The one which is lit up by something, it cannot light that up. It's like, they say that, it's like the one who is given you a job, you don't argue with him and say, okay, you are doing your job because of me. No, he has appointed you. You don't argue with him. He's going to talk to you the way Elon Musk has. You read in the newspaper, he sort of fired a mail to all his senior managers saying that whenever I give any direction, you give me 3 responses. Tell me how I'm wrong. Number 2, tell me if there are any gaps in my advice or any problems. Third, execute it. And if 3 of these things don't happen, I'm going to fire you. Why? Because he's the boss. He has invested his money, his ideas. These are his companies. He's just a human being, right? Maybe a little arrogant. Maybe he's a Superman in the tech world. That's fine. Think about Sarva Niyamaka, Param Brahman, the Sarva Bhasaka. So all these tiny stars and suns and moons and all, who impress us, who frighten us, who please us, depending where we are. If it's winter, the sun is pleasing. Sun, not so pleasing. So these ones who sort of frighten us or please us, they don't frighten or please Param Brahman. They are lit up by Param Brahman. And that's why they cannot light up anything. Therefore, this verse said, Na tadabhasayate suryo na sasangho na pavakaha, because he's swaying jyoti. That part is clear. Then he's saying, Yad gatva na nivartante. There'll be a lot of debate there. Tad gatva na nivartante tad dhama paramam mama. Now this part, going there, nobody comes back. Now we have understood that in very simple words. That is mukti, videha mukti, and therefore a person has no reason to be reborn because he has no more any desire. His sanchita karmas are destroyed. Prarabdha karmas are, he has put up with it, and then agami karmas are also destroyed because of samya jnanam that we have discussed in the previous chapters of Bhagavad Gita. And now, why they shouldn't come back, he is again explaining it, Madhusudana Saraswati. These have been already dealt with by Bhagavan. That Jnana Agni it burns up all karmas, Sanchita and Agami, including Prarabdha. Actually, in Upadesha Sahasri, Bhagavan says all karmas are destroyed. The Prarabdha karma appears to trouble a mukta person for the guy who's watching him, because he has ignorance. The Jnani is not affected at all. But the Ajnani watching him is, kitna kasht ho raha hai, but he's not affected at all. So he's sort of going to explain that. Now before that, na tatra, he's quoting from Svetasvattar Upanishad. I think it is 6:14 from that beautiful Upanishad. Na tatra suryo bhati, na Chandra Tarakam Nema Vidyuto Bhati Kutoyam Agnihi Tameva Bhantam Anubhati Sarvam Tasya Bhasa Sarvam Idam Vibhati Tameva Bhantam. The first thing is na tatra suryo bhati, वहां पे ना सूरज रोशनी देता है ना चांद, nor no vidyuto bhanti, nor fire, kutoyam agnihi, there no lightning, what this fire will do, tameva bhantam, when that one sort of, it lights up, anubhati sarvam, it lights up everything, and tasya bhasa sarvam idam vibhati, with its light, everything lights up. So know that. That's what is going to give you complete liberation and wisdom and understanding of everything. Etena tadapadam vedyam nava. Now the doubt is, the student has a lot of multiple doubts in his mind. Oh, really? You're saying that that cannot be lit up by anything. What does that mean? Can you understand it? Because it's beyond all light. That means even with jnana loka, whatever you're trying to know, can you see that? Because when I put a torchlight, I can see a book. But you are saying that it lights up everything, nothing can light that up. But how can I know that? Now, the dual is asking this question with a presumption. The presumption is that Brahman is different from us. Then only we cannot know it because we are in darkness, we are Jnanis, and that is Swayam Jyoti. How can we know it? Now, the teacher will explain beautifully and say that please do not misunderstand this question. You are actually not different from that Swayam Jyoti Brahman. You are kind of covered with a false understanding. You drop the curtain and then you'll realize you're showing Jyoti. You are not trying to see something which is different from you. It's a Vedya Vedaka or a Vedya and you are knowing it. And that's something that Dhyaya, that Dhyata, Dheya, Dhyana. These kind of dualities are there because of ignorance. When we go beyond this, there is no problem. That he's explaining here. Etena tatpadam vedyam nava. Can we know it or not? Tatpadam, that Brahma padam. Adya Vedya Bhinna Veditri Sapakshatvena Vedapattihi. So there is a Vedi. So there is what? There are two things. Veditri, the one who knows, Betta, the one who will know the Brahman, and Vedya, which will be known. Brahman will be known by the knower of Brahman, that student of Vedanta. So there is a duality. Where is your Advaita? Where is your monism? Where is your non-dualism? That is the question, and he's explaining. Vedya Virna Veditri Sapekshatvena Dvaitapattihi. There will be duality. Ditya, if you say no, Brahman cannot be known. Fine, I don't want to fight with you. Then he said, what is the need of doing Vedanta? अब तो मिलेगा ही नहीं आपको ज्ञान, उसके पीछे क्यों भागना है? So that is why he is asking. Ditya to apurusharthatva apattihi, then that dharma artha kama moksha, that is the main purushartha at the end of it, that will become apurushartha. Why? You cannot get that. You cannot get that Brahma Jnana. What is the point of doing it? Then apatihi iti apastam, that is refuted. How it is refuted? It's like this. Aveditve sati api swayam aparokshatvat. Yeah, it's aveditva, it's avedya, it's not knowable. In Ken Upanishad, Bhagavan says, the one who thinks he knows, he doesn't know. Why? Because the one who knows Brahman is separate from him, he actually doesn't know what Brahman is. That's why he's saying the one who says he knows, he doesn't. The one who says he knows Brahman, like he knows a pencil or a scale or something, he doesn't know what Brahman is, because Brahman is not different from his own self. So if he thinks as a Bahya Visaya, he knows it, he's misled. Therefore, he's saying, Avedyatve sati, Bahyatvena avidyatve sati, Swayam aparokhyatvat. You can experience it yourself, it's verily you, it's not different from you. Tatra avedyatvam suryadi avhasatvena atra uktam. That avedyatva, वो किसी के द्वारा प्रत्यक्ष नहीं हो पाएगा, that is explained by saying that it is not lit up, it cannot be illumined by sun or moon or fire. That is the avedyatva aspect of Brahman. In what sense? Bahyatvena is an external object. Brahman is not an external object. It is sarvatmaka, We are not different. All of us are just one. We are all Brahman. So if we think Brahman is different from us, we cannot know it. It's avidya. Why? Even the sun cannot light it up. We all draw our consciousness from that pure consciousness. We cannot use our consciousness to know that grand consciousness. Then how do you do it? Drop your individual consciousness. It's very simple. When we drop our individual consciousness, then we become aware of that grand consciousness. When we drop all our thoughts, then that grand attention replaces thoughts. And when we have that pure attention without thoughts, and that asti rupa, that easiness, takes possession of all temporary processes and events in our mind, then we go closer and closer to that self-realization. That is what is hinted here. And he explains it beautifully. Is Suryadi atra uktam sarvabhasakatvena, that Atma is sarvabhasaka vena tu swayam aparokshatvam. It illumines itself. The torchlight doesn't need another light to show where is the torchlight. It shows itself. Similarly, the Atma shows itself. Yad adityagatam teja ityatra vakhyati. And yad adityagatra tejam ityatra vakhyati. Evam ubhavyam slokabhyam shrutera daladvayam vakhyatameti drashtavyam. So that is how you try to make sense of these two aspects. Tadbhasayati surya na sasanko na pavakaha. And he's saying yad gatva na nivartante tad thama paramam mama. And then he will explain the whole debate on what does it mean that he will not come back. Now the student asks, okay, I understand that Swayam Jyoti means that it is Apuraksha, that jnana is possible to get it and one has to be aware. But taha jana hai, you are again saying going somewhere. If you're saying that it is self-knowledge, then you're saying yad gatva, going where, knowing which. Again, there is some duality. I'm confused. Then teacher has to explain. Nano yad gatva na nivartanti ityuktam yadi gacchati. Tari avartate eva swargavat. If he has to go somewhere, he has to come back because the Upanishads say that with our punya karmas, we will go Dakshinaya Marga, Pitri Loga. We have to come back when that punya phala, that saving in terms of whatever good things we have done, accordingly we'll be having few minutes of stay. Like you have a lot of savings and you check into a 7-star hotel, it's very expensive. You go stay somewhere near Times Square, and they can charge you up to $2,000-3,000 a night. All your savings will be over. Then they say, okay, sir, so your credit card limit is over, or you deposit some advance or something. Then you abandon that hotel. You go somewhere to more economy places. Similarly, he's saying here, yad gatvana nivartante ityuktam yadi gacchati tari avartante eva swargavat. Atha na avartante tari na gacchati. So if he doesn't come back, essentially you have to say that he actually doesn't go anywhere, but you are using this word, he goes. Tena gatva iti na nivartante iti parasvara viruddham. So either you drop this word gatva, having gone there, he doesn't come back, or don't say he goes but he doesn't come back, because whatever goes has to come back. Then he's quoting one sentence from Balmiki Ramayana, Ayodhya Kanda 105.16, and that's a beautiful thing. Sarve kshayanta nichayaha patananta samusrayaha sanyoga viprayoganta marananta hi jivitam. Now we have to just reverse it to understand it. Sarve kshayanta nichayaha. We have to just reverse it. Sarve nichayaha kshayanta. Whatever expands shrinks. Whatever grows gets reduced. It's wealth or anything. Samusrayaha patanantaha. Whatever goes up, it comes down. Whether it's a rocket or anything goes up, it comes down. Sanyoga viprayogantaha. So whatever there is a meeting or whatever comes together also splits. Maranantam hi jivitam. All of us are living. Jatasya hi dhruva mrityu. So obviously all of us have to abandon this body. How can you say having gone he doesn't come back? It's confusing to me, sir. Then the teacher explains. Iti hi sastre lokecha prasiddham. The Purvapati is saying, my dear sir, why didn't you see that? Siddhanti, the teacher, is teaching the student with a smile, because sometimes you must have seen moms play with their children. So, oh, really? Mom, I'll really get angry with you. And the mom doesn't get angry. She smiles and says, "So, are you going to beat me up or what are you trying to do?" "No, I'll not obey you." The child says, "Mom is having fun." Similarly, Bhagavan, the teacher, is here having fun. So he's saying, "Oh, really?" He's saying, "Anatma praptihi punarabritti paryavasana, na to atma praptihi iti chet." He's trying to give some keys to the student to understand his own mistakes. He's saying, look here, whenever you have any anatma prapti, like money, wealth, youth, a good relationship, are there atma prapti? No, anatma prapti, non-self, material gains. You will lose them. But what about knowing the self? It's different from a material gain. Why don't you draw that line of distinction? The student says, no, he doesn't agree. Susupto sata somya sada sampurna bhavati. Haven't you read that in the Upanishads? That having gone to sleep, a person is comprehensively having great happiness because he's having Atmananda. He's getting, he's getting that close proximity. He's one with the self. Sada somya sampurna bhavati iti shruti pratipadita, because it is verily explained in the Upanishads. Api Atma Praptehe, and that is very close to Atma Prapti, Atma thing. He gets the self. Punarabhritti Paryantatva Darsanat, but he gets up in the morning. When he goes to deep sleep, all his pains are over. He doesn't know whether he had a fight, he had a good reward, he had a good interaction or a bad interaction. He forgets everything. Sada Somya, Sada Sampanno Bhavati, having gone to deep sleep. Now, but he gets up. So punar avartante eva. How can you say that atma prapti? Only in case of anatma prapti he comes back. In case of atma prapti, he doesn't come back. But I'm giving you an example of deep sleep. How do you explain why he comes back in the morning? Tasya opacharikatve tasmad atma prapto gatva na upapadyate. So please don't convince me, sir. Having gone to the self, he will not come back. He has to come back and take a few rebirths. And earlier, he had said, कम से कम 3 बार तो जन्म लेना पड़ेगा. एक बार संचित कर्म खत्म करने, एक बार प्रारब्ध कर्म, एक बार आगामी कर्म. You remember the debate when we had that previously. So he's asking those questions, stupid questions, but these questions are beautifully asked on our behalf to clarify our doubts by the great dialogue in Bhagavad Gita. Tasya opacharikatvepi anidrittihi na upapadyate iti. So he's saying that he'll not come back. That is not very obvious. So he has to come back. Evam prapte brumaha. The teacher begins to answer that sort of a doubt. Why after Atmajnana a person doesn't have to be reborn here? Gantuhu jivasya gantavya brahma bhinnatvad gatva iti opacharikam. My dear boy, you forgot that we are Vedantis, the Brahman and Jiva are one and the same. So where does he go? He doesn't go anywhere. He just gets himself. So Gantuhu jivasya, who is Ganta here? Who is the person who is going? That Gantri, that is that person, is that Jiva, Jivatma. Gantavya, what is the destination? Brahma Prapti. Brahma Bhinnatvad, and that Gantavya is different from the Ganta. The destination and the journeyman are one and the same thing. It's like you are starting your journey for Brahma Jnana with a Google map and you set the coordinates as per the Upanishads. Tattvamasi, Aham Brahmasmi. You write in that coordinate, Aham Brahmasmi. You start your journey. Then you do a lot of serious trekking. Where do you end up? Same coordinates. Why? What information had you fitted there? Aham Brahmasmi. I am verily the self. So you'll come back to the same coordinates, but with the knowledge of the Upanishads and removal of all ahankara and mamakara. The doubts are removed. We are who we are. There's nothing new there. And therefore, a Brahmagyani doesn't have horns. He doesn't have any tantric powers. He's not very attractive. He's not very charming. He doesn't attract thousands of people. He's just a nice, happy, quiet animal called a Vedanti who lives his quiet life. Very simple. But he doesn't have the trouble of others. That is the only difference. He's saying, Gantur jivasya gantavya brahma bhinnatvad gatva iti opacharikam. It's a manner of speaking that having gone there, it's all about knowing. Ajnana matra vyavahitasya tasya jnana matrena eva prapti vyapadesat. This prapti is what? The difference between the gantavya and the gantri wherever he's standing is ajnana. Once you remove that ajnana, the gantavya is and the gyantavya is very much within you. Okay? Yadi Brahmana, and then he's taking two views. One is the Pratibimbavada or Vivaranavada, where the Brahman is reflected in the individual souls. There is the Avachedavada of Bhamati Vachaspati Mishra, where like a Ghatakasa, Avacheda is a limitation. The Brahman is everywhere, like space. Then we say that space inside this bottle, you say bottle space. Though it is limited by these contours of this small, tiny bottle, a balm. Similarly, the Brahman, limited by the contours of our individual consciousness, is the jiva, but essentially it's just one, that like the space. Same way here, that both the examples is taking. The pratibimba, like the jalasurya, that water, the sun is reflected in the river, and the other one is that ghatakasha, like the space inside a jar or a pot. He's taking both of the examples here. Jadi Brahmana Pratibimbo Jivaha is first taking the Vivaranabhada of Sureswaracharya and all the southern great commentators from southern India. So Brahmana Pratibimbo Jivaha Tada Jala Pratibimbita Surya se Jalapaye Pratibimba Bhuda Surya Gamanam Tata Anabrittischa. So there is a pot of water and the sun is reflected in it. And if you remove that water, remove that pot, what happens to the sun? It is where it was, isn't it? So similarly, the reflector is removed, the reflection of the original object, it goes back to its own state. That is how it is. You remove the mirror, something was reflecting on it. Where does it go? It is where it was. And then, second one, the abachedavada. Yadi brahmana Jalapaye, when the water dries up, Pratibumba Bhuta Surya Gamanam Tata Anabriti. So then there'll be no anabriti. The sun is not going to be reflected again. Similarly, the jiva, that Chaitanya which is reflected in us, the ajnana is gone, that I am different from the Brahman. So what is reflected in what? I am Aham Brahmasmi, I have that jnana, then what happens? I am liberated. I don't have to take birth again. That's what he's saying. Yadicha buddhyava chinno brahma bhago jiva. Then, if we go by the Vachaspati Mishra's arguments that we are limited by certain contours called Jiva, then we are that Jivatma, like Ghatakasa, then in that case, Tada, Ghatakasasya Ghatapaye Mahakasam Pratigamanam Tato Anabrittischa. You break that pot, what happens? Where happens to that space inside that pot? If I break this bottle, what happens to the space inside this bottle? It becomes what it was. It was always space. I saw it as bottle space. I broke the bottle. Then I said, it's space. Space is not affected. That remains where it was. Then we can say that the space which was in this bottle became Mahakasa and it's not going to come back. This is just a manner of speaking. The truth of the matter is that there is only Mahakasha. Before and after, you broke, you saw, you broke the bottle. Same way. Akasam pratigamanam tato anabritis, and therefore neither. Tatha jivasya api upadhi apai, this upadhi name and form. I am a jiva, I'm a man, I'm a woman, I'm handsome, I'm rich, I'm poor, I'm miserable. Nirupadhi swarupa gamanam, the nirupadhi from aham brahmasmi. There are no names and form. You become Chaitanya Swarupa. Tata anabrittischa iti upachara uchyate. This is just a manner of speaking, upacharika. It's a style of speaking in order to make it easy for the beginners of Vedanta to understand it properly. Eka swarupatvad veda brahmasya cha upadhi nibritya nibritehe. There is only one reality called the Atman. There is one reality called the Brahman. So eka swarupatvad, Jiva and Brahma. Jiva Brahman or eka swarupada, they are only one thing. And therefore, the Bheda Brahma, the difference that is there, Tera Mera, O Mera Dusmanu, O Mera Dost hai, Mera Bhai hai, Meri Bibi hai, all these sort of thoughts that we have, this Bheda Jnana is based on a faulty understanding, and this is names and forms, the titles. You remove them. All of us are just one. That is the Brahman, the Chaitanya. Upadhi Vritya. And once you remove these upadhis, then obviously the upadhis, they are become upadhi nibritya, then the jivasya nibritehe, the jiva who is considered to be limited, he understands is unlimited. Then he's saying, what is the difference between susupti and a mukti? He has to explain it because the student had asked, what about deep sleep? So Bhagavan, the commentator, great Madhusudana Saraswati, is compassionately expanding on that point as well. Susupto tu agyane swakarane bhavana karma purva pragya sahitasya antakaranasya jivopadhehe सूक्ष्म रूपेण अवस्थानात् ततः एव अज्ञानात् पुनरुद्भवः संभवति. He's saying there is a difference. When we have mukti, all the ajnana, the bheda jnana, are summarily removed. But when we go to deep sleep, these problems are not removed. What happens? They go to that prakriti avastha. They become prakriti lina avastha. They go back to their own Vijavastha, they go to the seed form. And then when you wake up, they come back. Otherwise, the person who is next to us is our brother or a friend or enemy or whatever. When you wake up, you can't recognize him. You are flying, and it's a 23-hour journey from Delhi to New York, and you're sitting in that flight. If it's Air India flight, no stopovers. And it's interesting, it starts at night and it reaches there very early morning. So you just had a very long night. Now, when you're sleeping, you're waking up, you're sleeping again, you had a deep sleep, and you wake up and you don't remember anything. You'd say, where am I? Who is this guy sitting next to me? No, all these memories, everything comes back to you, right? So he's saying, Susuptocho ajnane swakarane bhavana karma purva pragya sahitasya antakaranasya, everything. The whole prapancha that is there in the subjective mold, they go to a seed form and small pen drive, that hard disk, it is stored there in the RAM. In the hard disk, of course, you have the Sanchita and all karmas. Here it goes into the RAM. When you wake up, the computer is in sleep mode. You wake it up, all the windows again open up. Similarly here, Jivopadhe Sukshma Rupena Avasthana, they stay in small Sukshma Rupa Avasthana Tataha Eva Ajnanat Punar Udbhavaha Sambhavati. Okay, again that rise and that everything come back. Jnanad ajnana nibrito. But in case of jnana, this ajnana, the bheda vritti, everything is removed. Bheda vrittau to karana bhava, the cause of the karma and all these pravrittis to rise, that's not possible because karana bhava kutah karyodaya. Karan hoga to karya hoga. If there is clay, then you can make a pot. I remove all clay. How do you make a pot? With what? You had some milk and you want to make a rasgulla. I steal all your milk. I spoil your milk. What rasgulla will you make? And what is that milk? That milk is the karmic energies we have, bad, good, whatever activities. And the ajnana, the false understanding that we are all different. Once that false understanding is removed, there is karana bhavaha. So karana bhavat karyodaya na sambhavaha iti. So the karyodaya is not possible. That's what he's explaining. Na sambhavati. And then karyodeha syad ajnana prabhavatvad, because this karyodaya, the rising up all the sanskaras and karmas and rebirth and everything is what? Ajnana prabhavatvad, they are possible. They are srishti out of false understanding. Ajnana prabhavatvad antakarnadi upadhinam. And then the names and forms associated with this antakarna, mana and indriyas and everything, they come back. And that he will explain how when we die, the theory is that they all become prana samahita. Prana is going to go, right? So all these indriyas withdrew in the beginning, and therefore in the Upanishad it says that just before a few hours before death, the indriyas have already become prana samahita. So he's looking at it. Somebody says something, but he doesn't recognize. He doesn't understand what his son is saying. He listens to it, but the indriya devata of hearing has become prana samahita. He looks at the person he was searching for. Just imagine a childhood friend, or maybe his daughter or wife, or somebody he loved most. It could be his son or friend or a teacher, or wife, daughter, anyone. And the daughter appears, but the father doesn't recognize her, and she's in tears. Papa, what happened? But actually, he's saying, he's just nodding his head. Because at that moment, as per Upanishads, the Indriyas have already become prana samahita. They have entered into the prana thing, and it pulls away all the Indriyas, all the servants, then goes together, and it goes away with all these Indriyas. So we lose these Indriya vrittis a few hours, a few minutes before the final abandonment of this body. That is what the Upanishad says. And they also say that it's very painful as an experience. And they compare it in Upanishad with a heavily loaded bullock cart carrying a lot of cargo and making that noise, that screeching noise it makes when it is moving. The jivatma sort of because it's carrying the load of papas and punyas, both, and therefore it's a overloaded cart with a lot of karmas, and therefore it's very painful, and therefore nobody wants to die. Why we don't want to die? They don't say because we are afraid of anything. The experience of carrying a whole load of karma is so painful. That's why we don't want to die. We don't want to carry that load of karma. So there is definitely some sanskara as per the Upanishads of the fact that we are actually Sachidananda Swarupa. Because of a faulty understanding, we are all trapped, and therefore we have to come back with the load of karma riding on our back. So he's saying, Tasma jivasya aham brahmasmi iti Vedanta vakya janya sakshatkarad aham na brahma iti ajnana nibritihi gatva iti uchyate. So once he has this knowledge, I am aham brahmasmi, with this knowledge, that ahankara, I am jiva, this particular thing is removed with the help of Vedanta vakya. So because he meditates on the Vedanta vakya, aham brahmasmi, his ignorance is slowly removed with the sadhana already explained in all these 14 chapters, and therefore he doesn't have to come back. Nibritasya cha anadi ajnanasya. This avidya is anadi, without a beginning when you remove it, but it is sadi, it has an end if we have jnana. Ajnanasya punaruthana bhavena, and therefore there is no chance that it will rise again, because you have removed the root of it. Tat karya sansara bhavo na nivartante. Therefore, the karya of ajnana is sansara. So there will be sansara abhava. There will be absence of prapancha. So therefore, there is no reason. Where we will come? We realize sansara is mithya, so we don't come back. Iti uchete iti na kopi biruvataha. That is our teacher refuted this idea of deep sleep as mukti, because there is memory of all the karmas there and it's not full. So there is Atmananda in deep sleep without Atma Jnana. So Viparita Grahana is not there. Vidya ka karya are two. This is a typical Vedanta question. So one is Agrahana, the other one is Viparita Grahana. So there is an inverted reception of the real world or unreal world as real. That is Viparita Grahana. It's a twisted perception of the world. The second one is lack of perception or non-perception. Now in deep sleep, Viparita Grahana fault is removed because you don't see an elephant in dream when you're sleeping. In deep sleep, there are no dreams. So there is no Viparita Grahana, no faulty reception of the external world. But there is no reception at all, which means Brahmajnana is not there. So there is agrahana, but ajnana is not removed. The ajnana is still there. You have to remove that ajnana or agrahana with satyagrahana, the atma jnana grahana, and that sort of requires that savana manana nitithyasana. Then jivasya tu paramarthikam swarupam brahma eva iti asakrada aveditam. Again and again in the Bhagavad Gita, Bhagavan has mentioned so far that the human beings, paramarthikatvena, ultimately we are all no different from the Bhagavad Gita. Tad etat sarvam pratipadyate uttarena granthena. In the coming few verses, Bhagavan will explain this aspect in great detail. Tatra jivasya brahma rupatvad ajnana nivritya tat swarupam praptasya. When we remove the jiva rupi brahma ka apna ajnana nivritti hote hue, ajnana nivritya, once we remove that darkness, that remove that ajnana, ignorance, tat swarupam praptasya, tat swarupam. Tat means that jivasya atma swarupa. When he gets that Swarupam Praptasya, that Jiva who is a Atmagyani, Tato no Prachuti iti, he doesn't fall down again. Iti Pratipadyate Mamai Vangsha. In the next verse, he will say, Mamai Vangsha Jiva Loke Jiva Bhutaha Sanatanaha. So he is verily me, but he doesn't understand it. So that is what Bhagavan is going to say in the next verse. Mana sastani sloka dena pratipadyata. However, he's pulled back. Why does he wake up from sleep? Why he is kind of stuck in this world after deep sleep? That question will also come. He's explaining why we wake up. Because these indriyas pull us back into samsara because the karmic load is still on our back. सुसुप्तौ तु सर्वकार्य संस्कार सहित अज्ञान सत्वात् ततः पुनः संसारो जीवस्य इति मनसष्टानि श्लोकार्धेन प्रतिपाद्यते. So all this in deep sleep, we have all the impressions of the past karmas and papas and punyas and everything. They are only in seed form, and therefore, because they are there and the ignorance is there, so the punar sansara jivasya, we get pulled back into the sansara again to this world. Tataha tasya vastutaha asansarinopi, though we are asansari. Why? No, we are Sachidananda Swarupa, Amritasya Putraha, all of us. But then, because of ignorance, and therefore, though vastutaha, actually we are not sinful, we are not sansari, we are asansari. Despite that, maya ya sansaram praptasya, because of this maya, because of this grand delusion that we think we are sansaris. We have children, we have house, we have money, we have this, we have that. Praptasya mandamanti mativihi, because we are dull-minded people. Dehatadaatmyam, then we identify with this body. Pratipatya prapitasya, then we think we have this body. It's not very healthy. I need to take so much of medicine. Deha vyatirekah pratipadyate. Dehad vyatirekah. But this jiva bhuta, this Jiva Bhuta Chaitanya, this is actually different from the body that he will mention in the next verse. Pratipadyate Sariram Ityadina Slokarthana. In the next verse, he will explain it. Sotram Chakyu Ityadina tu Yatha Yatham Swavishaya Swaviseshu Indriyanam Pravartakasya Tasya Tebhyo Vitirekaha Pratipadyate. So there is this sentence that these indriyas pull this man back into waking state and reactivate him. That is the statement, isn't it? What does it mean? This jiva, this atma is definitely different. So what happens is again the superimposition of the maya and the ajnana and the names and forms. That delusional process gets reactivated in the morning, right? And there is one thing, okay, now it has come back. Susupti cannot, that is one of the reasons why a lot of people, I mean, when you are very depressed, you are not happy with certain event, what do you want? If you sleep, a lot of psychological research says that a lot of unresolved problems are kind of resolved in deep sleep. They say that. But what this Vedanta says, fundamental problems will not be resolved. Some temporary problems you may be able to resolve. So one of the reasons why some people take tranquilizers or alcohol or any kind of intoxicants, because they want to sort of get rid of a certain problem for a while, but you are not resolving it by avoiding it. So what do? Should you fight with it? No, we have another process. The process is to be self-aware and refute the presence of those problems by being aware of us. And Bhagavan says, look, always look at me. Don't feel depressed. You can't fight Maya. Mama Maya Duratya. Don't fight that delusional game. I mean, I'm sorry. This is a process. You have to go through it. You want to get rid of it? Focus on me. Perhaps that works. Some people, of course, say that even the Bhakti Marg and spirituality, some of these psychologists say that that doesn't actually resolve the psychological traumas or problems a person has, because he has to actually go to an analyst and pay the fees and sit on the couch and tell the story and resolve it. That's what they say. But if you look at Bhagavad Gita, the spiritual thing is that here the process of counseling is that remember who you are, remember who we are. We are not the limitations which seem to trouble us. We will accept it at a temporary level. That's fine. But we will remember our source. We will seek help from the divine. and will continue to remove the dirt and the filth which surrounds our consciousness. This dirt and the filth are thoughts which kind of debilitate us, trouble us, traumatize us. There are past bad events, but we are not those events. There are certain bad things in the past, but we are not those things. We are beyond those things, and that is what is the message of Bhagavad Gita, that Brahman. And Bhagavan says, no, focus on that. That is the way out. I just remembered this whole Susupti stage. Why we come back? Because the fundamental issue remains unresolved. And therefore, this Vedantic meditation helps us realize our the unlimited truth that we represent, that we are ourselves. And that sort of is very liberating. It's very reassuring to know that and bank on that. And that sort of helps us to fight a lot of distractions and depressions and traumas and troubles in life. Tadha tasya vastu, okay, that we have done. Evam dehandriyadi vilakshanam utkranti adi utkrantyadi samaye swatma rupatvat kimiti sarve na pasyanti tyasankayam visaya vikshipta chitta darsana yogyam api tam na pasyanti iti uttara muchyate. There will be a verse which is going to come. When this utkraman of the jiva happens, you are saying that all the indriyas, the prana pulls and carries with it, so all the indriyas are there, then why they cannot see this whole world at once? Why he cannot see? He's saying, look, there is a person who is deluded, or maybe he's intoxicated. And it's quite possible many times that you're looking for a piece of paper, maybe your passport, and you have to catch a flight and you are not finding it. Is it not possible? It has happened with all of us. You look for spectacles, your tickets, or your passport in the last moment. It's possible when a person is a little intoxicated, he has the ability to see things where he cannot see it. Similarly, a person is doing a maths, a student, and he cannot see that it's very easy to solve because of a certain faulty understanding. The teacher says, why don't you look at this? Don't you think you can apply that? Oh, sir, yes, thanks. And then the Vedanta comes and sort of helps us out of it. So he says that in the next verse, he's saying, Jnana chakshusaha pasanti iti vibhritam yatanto yogina iti slokarthana. So the guys, he can see it with the eyes of knowledge, of wisdom. And then Vimudha Nanu Pashyanti. However, the guys who are kind of deluded, divorced from this ability to see, they cannot, of course, see. Okay, I'm sort of crossing the time. So I'll just do Ucharanam of the next verse and I'll stop there. Mavi Vansa Jiva Loke Jiva Bhuta Sanatanaha Manaha Sastan Indriyani Prakriti Stani Karshati. So Mama Eva Angsho Jiva Bhutaha, that in the Jiva Loka, this Jivatma, is part of me. That means it's actually Sachidananda Swarupa. Sanatanaha, it's actually eternal, perennial, but it thinks it's temporary, it's going to die and stuff like that. And then when he wakes up every day in the morning, these indriyas, mana is sixth indriya, and all these five indriyas, prakriti sthani, they are in that laya avastha, they are in the vija avastha, karsati, and they sort of together pull him back in the samsara. But the details we'll do tomorrow. We'll cross the time. Thank you for your attention. I'll put an end to the YouTube, and any questions you can ask in the Google Meet.